I never thought I'd be a widow at 34. But here I am, Dakota, sitting at my kitchen table at 7 a.m., trying to get my 7-year-old son ready for school while fighting back tears. It's been 8 months since the accident at the construction site took Mark from us, but sometimes it feels like yesterday. The first few months after Mark's death were a blur of paperwork, tears, and sleepless nights. I honestly don't know how I would have made it through without Sarah and Jim, my in-laws. They'd been absolute angels, picking Tommy up from school every day so I can focus on work. I stopped by their place afterward to get him, and every single time, they tried to give me money. "Sarah, really, I can't take this," I said last week, pushing back the envelope she tried to slip into my purse. "Dakota, sweetie, we want to help," she insisted, her kind eyes meeting mine. "We know the insurance company paid well, but your family. Let us do this." She's right about the insurance. The company paid out $300,000 after Mark's death. Between that and my job as a marketing manager, we're doing okay financially. But it's not about the money with Sarah and Jim, it's about the love they show us every day. If only my own parents were half as supportive. Mom and Dad have always made it clear that my older sister Rachel was their golden child, and now they extend that same favoritism to her kids over Tommy. Last weekend was typical. Tommy was excited to see his grandparents, but within 20 minutes, Mom was complaining about his questions. "Why does the clock make that sound?" Tommy asked, pointing to their antique grandfather clock. "How does it work inside?" "Dakota, can't you control him?" Mom sighed, rolling her eyes. "He's always asking questions about everything. Rachel's kids never give us this much trouble." Dad nodded in agreement, reaching for his laptop. "Here, Tommy, why don't you play some games instead?" "Look, I downloaded some new ones." But Tommy didn't want games. He wanted to talk, to learn, to connect. Meanwhile, Rachel's 3 kids sat in the corner, completely absorbed in their phones, barely acknowledging anyone's presence. And my parents held this up as the ideal behavior. I've learned to bite my tongue. Growing up as the less favored child, I got used to these comparisons long ago. Now I just shake my head and stay silent when they praise Rachel's parenting while criticizing mine. At least they do help occasionally with Tommy, watching him when I have late meetings or picking him up if both Sarah and Jim are busy. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday dinner at my parents' house. The warning signs were there from the moment I walked in. Mom had made my favorite lasagna, which she usually only does when she wants something. Dad was unusually chatty, asking about work, about Tommy, about everything really. They were building up to something, I just didn't know what. "So, Dakota," Mom said, carefully cutting her lasagna into perfect squares, "we've been meaning to ask you something. How much was Mark's life insurance payout?" The question hit me like a slap in the face. I nearly choked on my water, completely blindsided by such a direct inquiry about something so personal. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe I was just tired of keeping secrets from my parents, but I answered honestly. "About $300,000, I said quietly. The fork in Mom's hand clattered against her plate. Dad's head snapped up so fast I thought he might hurt himself. They stared at me like I'd just announced I'd won the lottery. "Well," Mom said, putting down her fork deliberately, "what are you planning to do with all that money?" I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. "I've invested it," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's for Tommy's future, his college education, maybe help him buy an apartment when he's older. Mark and I always talked about." "But that's years away," Dad interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "You should be thinking about the present, Dakota. About yourself and your family." The way he said family made it clear he wasn't talking about Tommy. I knew that tone, it was the same one they used when they'd help Rachel with her down payment on her house, or when they'd funded her lavish wedding. "You could do so much with that money now," Mom chimed in, leaning forward eagerly. "You could help your family, people who need it today, not save it all for some distant future that might not even." "I'm not discussing my money anymore," I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. The silence that followed was deafening. They both sat back, Dad's face clouding over with that familiar disappointment I'd seen so many times growing up. Mom pressed her lips together in that thin line that always meant trouble. The rest of the dinner passed in tense silence, broken only by the scraping of forks against plates. I thought that would be the end of it. Knowing my parents, I expected them to give me the silent treatment for at least a month. It's what they always did when I didn't live up to their expectations. But to my surprise, Mom called just a week later. "We're having a family dinner on Sunday," she announced, her voice warm as if nothing had happened. "Rachel and the kids will be there too. You have to come, sweetie." Something about her tone made me uneasy, but I agreed. When I arrived that Sunday, Rachel was already there with her 3 kids, all of them glued to their phones as usual. As we sat down to eat, she started talking about rising prices, bills piling up, and how hard it was to make ends meet these days. "Everything is just so expensive now," she sighed, passing the potatoes. "Your father and I barely have enough for a normal life anymore." As Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, talking about rising grocery prices and utility bills, Rachel cleared her throat and sat up straighter. "I've been thinking," she announced, looking around the table with that same self-righteous expression she'd worn since we were kids. "Dakota and I should help Mom and Dad financially. I'll send them $500 every month. I wish I could do more, but you know how it is, Jack's the only one working, and with 3 kids. She trailed off, letting that sink in before turning to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But you, Dakota, you should send them $1,000 monthly." "Excuse me?" I nearly choked on my water. "Well, it makes sense," Rachel pressed on. "You earn really well at your job, and you only have 1 child to support. Plus, with your situation, you have other income now." My blood boiled at her careful avoidance of mentioning Mark's death directly. I wanted to scream that I was a widow, that I didn't have a husband's income to rely on anymore, that the other income she was referring to was meant for my son's future. But Mom was already clapping her hands in delight, and Dad was beaming like it was Christmas morning. "Oh, girls," Mom exclaimed, "you don't know what this means to us." I sat there, torn between anger and disbelief, watching my family's expectant faces. The words of refusal died in my throat. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn their approval, and here they were, putting a price tag on it. "Fine," I heard myself say, "I'll do it." The first transfer hurt the most. $1,000, gone with a few clicks. I told myself it was worth it if it meant more family support with Tommy. But that fantasy quickly unraveled. "Mom, could you pick Tommy up from school today? Sarah has a doctor's appointment, and I have a late meeting." "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," Mom's voice crackled through the phone. "I've got such a headache today. You know how my migraines get." This became a pattern. Every time I needed help with Tommy, there was an excuse. Mom was too busy. She was tired. She had errands to run. Her back was acting up. Meanwhile, the $1,000 left my account like clockwork every month. One particularly frustrating Thursday, after Mom claimed she couldn't watch Tommy because she might be coming down with something, I called Sarah in desperation. "Of course we'll pick him up," Sarah said without hesitation. "Jim's already heading to the school, he loves their little chats on the drive home. Tommy's been telling him all about their science project." I hung up the phone and sat at my desk, fighting back tears. $1,000 a month bought me nothing but excuses from my own mother, while my mother-in-law dropped everything to help without asking for a penny. December crept up on me that year. We'd always spent Christmas at my parents' house. It was tradition, the whole family gathered there, exchanging gifts, sharing meals, making memories. The call came exactly a week before Christmas. I was helping Tommy with his homework when my phone lit up with Mom's number. "Dakota, honey," she started, using that syrupy sweet tone that always preceded bad news. "About Christmas Eve. We've decided to do something different this year. We're having an adults-only party. No children allowed." The pencil I was holding snapped in my hand. What? It's just that we want to do something more sophisticated this year, Mom continued, as if she was discussing something as trivial as changing dinner plans. You know, wine, adult conversation. But it's Christmas, I protested, moving away so Tommy couldn't hear. What am I supposed to do with Tommy? Oh, that's easy, she replied, her voice light and dismissive. You can leave him with Sarah and Jim. They'd love to have him, I'm sure. You'll come by around 7? After hanging up, I stared at Tommy, who was still working on his math problems, completely unaware that his grandmother had just uninvited him from Christmas. My heart ached, watching him concentrate on his multiplication tables, his tongue sticking out just like Mark's used to. I spent the next week debating what to do. The thought of celebrating without Tommy felt wrong, but skipping the family Christmas entirely seemed too dramatic. Finally, I came up with a compromise. I'd leave Tommy with Sarah and Jim for a few hours, make an appearance at my parents' house to exchange gifts and greetings, then head back to celebrate properly with my in-laws and son. On Christmas Eve, I pulled up to my parents' house alone, a bag of carefully wrapped presents in hand. The driveway was full of cars, more than usual for our family gatherings. Walking up to the front door, I could hear laughter and Christmas music spilling out into the cold December air. I opened the door, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. The house was packed with relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, but that wasn't what stopped me in my tracks. There, running through the living room with paper crowns on their heads, were Rachel's 3 kids. And near the Christmas tree, I spotted my cousin Linda's children helping themselves to cookies. More kids appeared in my line of sight, my cousin Mark's twins, my cousin Susan's teenager. The room suddenly felt too hot, too tight. I stood in the doorway, the gift bag hanging limply from my hand, as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't an adults-only party at all. It was a party where only my son wasn't welcome. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind struggling to process the scene before me. My Aunt Marie was the first to spot me. "Dakota, sweetheart," she rushed over to hug me, then looked around expectantly. "Where's little Tommy? Don't tell me he's sick on Christmas Eve." Before I could answer, my cousin Peter chimed in. "Yeah, where's our favorite little scientist? Jake's been wanting to show him his new chemistry set." More relatives gathered around, all asking the same question. Where was Tommy? Why had I come alone? Each inquiry felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I couldn't form words, couldn't explain what I didn't understand myself. Through the crowd, I spotted my mother in the kitchen, arranging cookies on a Christmas-themed platter as if everything was perfectly normal. As if she hadn't just excluded her only grandson from a family celebration. "Excuse me," I managed to say, pushing past my concerned relatives. My feet carried me to the kitchen on autopilot, anger building with each step. "Mom," I said, my voice low and controlled, "can we talk? Privately?" Something in my tone made her put down the platter. I led her into the hallway, away from prying eyes and ears. "You told me this was an adults-only party," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You specifically told me not to bring Tommy. So why are Rachel's kids here? Why are all the cousins' children here?" Mom straightened her Christmas sweater, not meeting my eyes. "Well, that's different." "Different how?" "Those children," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the living room, "know how to behave at formal gatherings. They're well-mannered." I stared at her in disbelief. "Well-mannered? Tommy is one of the most polite children I know. His teachers praise his behavior, constantly. Sarah and Jim always say." "Oh, Sarah and Jim," Mom interrupted, rolling her eyes. "They spoil him, encourage all those endless questions. The other children, they deserve to be here more. They know their place." As if on cue, a commotion erupted from the dining room. Rachel's youngest son, Kevin, had grabbed a handful of deviled eggs and was throwing them at his sister. The eggs sailed across the room, splattering against Emily's new Christmas dress as she shrieked. I turned back to my mother, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, I can clearly see their superior manners on display." Mom's face hardened. That's just children being children. But when Tommy asks questions about how things work, that's unacceptable behavior? Don't be so dramatic, Dakota. He's fine with Sarah and Jim. I'm leaving, I announced, turning toward the door. I'm going back to my son. Mom shrugged, examining her manicure. Fine, leave if you want to make a scene. But put your gifts under the tree first, we're opening them after dinner. Something snapped inside me as I stood there, watching my mother's dismissive shrug. Before I could second-guess myself, I walked into the center of the living room. I cleared my throat loudly, the sound cutting through the holiday music and chatter. Heads turned, conversations died mid-sentence, and suddenly all eyes were on me. Several of you have asked why I came alone tonight, I began, my voice stronger than I expected. Why Tommy isn't here celebrating Christmas with his family. Rachel started to move toward me, but I held up my hand. Let me finish. I'm here alone because a week ago, Mom called and told me this was an adults-only party. I was specifically told not to bring Tommy. What? Aunt Marie's voice cut through the silence. But all the children are here. We didn't know anything about a ban on children, Uncle Steve added, looking confused. Mom stepped forward, her face flushed. Dakota, this isn't the time. Oh, I think this is exactly the time, I continued, my voice rising slightly. Because, you see, there wasn't really a ban on children. There was a ban on one child. My child. My son, who apparently isn't good enough for this family's Christmas celebration. The room erupted in murmurs. I saw shocked faces, disapproving looks directed at my parents, and confused children watching the adult drama unfold. But that's not even the best part, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. While my son isn't good enough to attend Christmas, I'm apparently good enough to send my parents $1,000 every month. And Rachel here sends $500. Rachel's husband Jack's head snapped up. Wait, what? What $500? The color drained from Rachel's face as Jack turned to her. You're sending your parents money every month? From where? Our account barely covers the bills as it is. Rachel's composure cracked. Her face flushed red as she looked between our parents and her husband. I never actually sent any money, she stammered. Mom and Dad asked me to say I was sending $500 so Dakota would agree to help them financially. They said if she thought I was contributing too. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched comprehension dawn on my relatives' faces as they pieced together what had happened, how my parents and sister had manipulated me into supporting them while simultaneously excluding my child from family events. You're telling me, Aunt Caroline's voice rang out, sharp and clear, that you scammed your own daughter out of thousands of dollars? You're nothing but scammers. Using your own daughter like an ATM while treating her kid like dirt? That's low, even for you too. The room erupted in overlapping voices, some expressing disgust, others demanding explanations. Rachel was trying to explain herself to an increasingly angry Jack, while my parents stood there, their carefully crafted facade crumbling around them. I raised my hand, silencing the ongoing arguments around me. I have something else to say. The room fell quiet again, all eyes returning to me. Mom and Dad stood frozen by the Christmas tree, their faces ashen. Rachel was still trying to explain herself to Jack, but even they stopped to listen. From this moment on, I said, my voice steady and clear, I will no longer be sending you any money. And I won't be maintaining any relationship with you or Rachel. I'm done. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out, leaving the bag of gifts by the door. The sound of the door closing behind me felt final, like the ending of a chapter one should have finished long ago. Sitting in my car, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. With a few quick taps, I canceled the monthly transfer to my mother's account. It felt like cutting off a chain I'd been dragging behind me for months. The drive to Sarah and Jim's house seemed to take both forever and no time at all. When I pulled into their driveway, I could see Tommy through the window, helping Sarah decorate Christmas cookies. The sight of him, happy and loved, brought tears to my eyes. We spent the rest of Christmas Eve with Sarah and Jim, decorating cookies, singing carols, and watching Tommy's eyes light up as he helped Jim arrange the nativity scene. This, I realized, was what family should feel like. The next morning, while Tommy was still asleep, surrounded by the presents Santa had brought, my phone rang. It was Aunt Caroline. "You might want to hear how things ended last night," she said without preamble. "After you left, it was like a dam broke. Uncle Mike stood up and said he couldn't stay in the house another minute. Then Aunt Marie and Uncle Steve followed. Pretty soon, everyone was gathering their coats and kids." I listened as she described how the relatives had left en masse, not even bothering to say goodbye to my parents. Some had apparently made very loud comments about manipulative behavior and family shame as they walked out. "And Jack?" I asked quietly. "Oh, honey," he was livid. "Packed up the kids right there and then, told Rachel he needed time to think about their marriage. Said he was taking the children to his parents' house for Christmas. Rachel was crying. Your parents were trying to damage control, but it was too late." I could hear her take a deep breath. "I want you to know, Dakota, we're all on your side. What they did to you and Tommy, it's unforgivable." After hanging up, I sat on my bed, processing everything. My phone started buzzing with notifications, text messages from Mom, Dad, and Rachel. They all said variations of the same thing: "We're sorry, we were wrong, please talk to us, we can explain." I read each message once, then archived them without responding. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a peaceful blur. Tommy and I spent quiet evenings with Sarah and Jim, played board games, watched holiday movies, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of being with people who truly loved us both. Then, on New Year's Eve morning, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Mom and Dad standing on my porch, clutching a large, elaborately wrapped package. My heart thumped against my ribs as I debated whether to open the door. "Dakota, we know you're home," Mom called out, her voice muffled through the door. "Please, we just want to talk." After a moment's hesitation, I opened the door, but stayed firmly in the doorway, blocking their entrance. They looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than they had a week ago. "We brought this for Tommy," Dad said, holding out the package. Through the wrapping paper, I could see the logo of an expensive electronics store. "He doesn't need it," I replied, making no move to take the gift. "Please, Dakota," Mom stepped forward. "We know we were wrong. The way we treated Tommy, the manipulation with the money, we're truly sorry. And we want you to know," Dad added quickly, "that this isn't about the money you were sending us. We really do feel terrible about everything." I studied their faces, searching for sincerity. "Are you sorry because you realize what you did was wrong, or are you sorry because the entire family knows what you did and won't speak to you anymore?" They exchanged glances, and in that brief look, I had my answer. "I think you should leave," I said quietly. "I don't believe you, and I don't trust you. Not anymore." "But we're family," Mom protested, tears welling up in her eyes. "No," I shook my head, "family doesn't manipulate each other. Family doesn't exclude a child from Christmas. Family doesn't scheme and lie to get money. What you did, that's not family." They left eventually, still clutching the unwanted gift, their apologies trailing behind them as they walked to their car. I watched them drive away, feeling not sadness, but relief. In the months that followed, I stuck to my decision. I didn't answer their calls or respond to their texts. Rachel tried reaching out too, but I blocked her number. The money I had been sending to my parents went into Tommy's college fund instead. The funny thing about cutting toxic people out of your life is how much room it makes for better relationships to grow. Aunt Caroline started inviting us over for Sunday dinners. Uncle Mike and his wife had us over for barbecues where Tommy could play with his cousins. Everyone made a point of including him, asking about his interests, encouraging his questions. "Mom, why does Uncle Mike's pool have that funny smell?" Tommy asked one summer afternoon. "That's the chlorine, buddy," Uncle Mike answered before I could, launching into an explanation about water treatment and chemical reactions that had Tommy fascinated. I watched my son bloom under the attention and love of family members who actually wanted to know him, not change him. He started calling Sarah and Jim Grandma and Grandpa exclusively now, and they continued to be our rocks, our safe harbor in any storm.
Hey, how much assets does your dad have? What? Why all of a sudden? Didn't he retire last year too? I was just thinking about his retirement funds and if he might be worried about it. Are you thinking about managing my dad's assets through your bank? I've been thinking about his future too. Maybe it'd be better to increase his retirement funds. Our bank offers various services like investment trusts and foreign currency deposits. Even if you say that, I don't really know much about it. Your father worked for a big corporation, and he must have received a decent retirement bonus. Plus, that house and land, they must be worth quite a lot. Jason said, his eyes sparkling. Seeing that look on his face made me feel like he was more interested in getting his hands on the assets rather than genuinely increasing my father's wealth. I am Sandra Parker, a 35-year-old part-time homemaker with no children yet. I am too busy with work to even think about children, but being 35, I have thought about taking it seriously. Hey, this is amazing. What? The land of your family home, it's worth a lot. The area has been developing, and land prices are skyrocketing. You looked that up? It's important, isn't it? It might be better to sell it now and buy an apartment somewhere else. Why are you getting ahead of yourself? That's for my parents to decide, not us. If you suggest it, your father and mother might get interested. My family home belongs to my father and mother, whatever it's worth, it's none of our business. Plus, it's the house I grew up in and have many memories and attachments to. It's very reassuring to know that such a family home exists. There's no way I would talk to my parents about selling it and moving somewhere else. Of course, if they decide to sell it and want to live somewhere else, I'd be a little sad but wouldn't oppose it. In fact, I don't think I'm in a position to either oppose or support it. Moreover, the money from the sale would belong to my parents, and we have no right to it. I don't understand why my husband can't see that. Recently, I'm frankly fed up with my husband who keeps talking about such things. Perhaps his sales performance has been dropping, and he's desperately eyeing my family's assets. My husband works in the sales department of a major bank. My in-laws run a small dried goods store in a rural area. They are not bad people, but they are somewhat proud that their only son is an elite banker. It's lucky for you to marry an elite banker like my son. I was told when we went to greet them prior to the wedding, but I just smiled and nodded. My husband hated country life and moved to the city to attend university. He graduated from a fairly well-known university and worked at a well-known city bank. Before we got married, he didn't brag much about it, but after 2 or 3 years of marriage, he often said, "You're lucky, you know. A mere clerk at a small company, married to an elite banker like me. You can brag about it to your friends, huh?" Even if my husband is very capable and indeed an elite, boasting to friends about it would just be showing off. But well, as long as he says it at home, it's harmless, and if it makes him feel better about his job, I thought I might as well boost his ego. Men in their 30s, working in such environments, often have a tough time dealing with both higher-ups and subordinates. So, even though I internally thought, "What the heck is that about?" I went along with it appropriately. Really, I'm glad I could marry you. Saying this keeps my husband in a good mood, and it's much better than contradicting him and creating a hostile atmosphere. Now I think maybe that thought has made my husband a bit too arrogant. I graduated from the economics department of a university and joined a company that manufactures and sells electronic components. It's not a major corporation, but it's a fairly well-known company that has contracts with major electronics manufacturers and has several sales offices nationwide. I work in the accounting department there. My husband's bank and my company have a business relationship, and he often visited my company for sales purposes, which is how we naturally started talking and eventually began dating. I thought he was a bit too confident, but I have always been told I am too serious or too rigid, so maybe someone like him was just right for me. From my school days, I was focused on studying, and even at university, while I did discuss with male classmates, it never developed into dating. So, he was my first boyfriend. I probably wasn't very experienced with men. Looking back, I think he might have exaggerated his boasts, but to me, it sounded like a joke. Thus, after dating for a year and a half, we decided to get married. I never had the concept of quitting my job after marriage, and during our dating period, I talked about continuing to work, so there was no discussion about quitting or not, and I just continued working normally. We visit my in-laws once or twice a year, about which they never say much. My husband says, "I'm busy with work." And they seem to be satisfied with that. It can't be helped, he's an elite banker. My mother-in-law says, "Actually, I've been getting busier too, so it's helpful for me." Then, 7 years into our marriage, my mother unusually called me at work one day. The moment the phone rang, I had a bad feeling, a premonition. "Hello, Sandra. My husband has. My father passed away suddenly." It was truly unexpected. That day, my parents had gone shopping together in the morning, had lunch outside, and returned home. My father said he felt sleepy and would take a nap in the bedroom. It was unusual for him to say that, so it felt odd, but my mother was busy with household chores. About 2 hours later, thinking of having dessert together, she went to the bedroom to wake him up, but found him lifeless. She called an ambulance immediately, but the paramedics said he was already breathless at the scene. Despite efforts at the hospital, his consciousness did not return, and they declared him deceased. Yet, my mother managed the funeral arrangements efficiently, contacting father's friends and colleagues from the company he had worked at until the previous year. She was so busy that it worried me. But perhaps she needed to stay active to keep her composure. If only I had gone to the bedroom sooner, why didn't I find his unusual behavior suspicious? These regrets were swirling in my mother's heart, I could tell. Watching her go through this, and the sudden loss of my father, was unbearably painful. Still, we managed to get through my father's funeral smoothly. But the real sorrow would come later. Especially for my mother, I worried if she would be all right. My parents had always seemed like such a loving couple, enviable even from a daughter's perspective. Busy times might distract her, but once things settled down after the funeral, the sorrow would surely overwhelm her. At the time, I too had work responsibilities I couldn't leave for long. Then my aunt, my father's sister, said she would stay with my mother, so I asked her to. My aunt and mother had been close since high school and got along very well. My aunt is a straightforward and caring person, and my mother often relied on her. I left things in my aunt's hands and stepped back. The day after the funeral, my husband said something outrageous. "Now that your father has passed, that means we can sell that house, right?" "Huh? What are you talking about?" "Well, you're inheriting it, right? It's yours, isn't it? My mother is still there. It's not just me to inherit. That house is too big for just your mother. Just sell it and put her in a nursing home or something. She'll make friends there and won't be lonely. Don't say stupid things. How can she even think about that now? My father's funeral was just yesterday." "What, you can't mean?" "What? You're not thinking of renouncing the inheritance, are you?" "What if I am?" "I haven't thought about that yet, but I think it might be okay. My mother has been busy and looks very worn out. Does this person not realize it's not the time for such discussions? No way. I won't allow that. Listen, I'm going to be clear about this." "What are you talking about?" "Your father's estate is mine. If you don't like it, let's divorce." Jason said with a smug look. What is with this overconfident face? How can he confidently say that the inheritance I receive is his? I don't understand at all. Moreover, suggesting divorce as if I would hand everything over to him if I wanted to avoid it. Where does this confidence, or rather this arrogance, come from? Basically, the property a wife inherits from her parents doesn't become her husband's property. Even a bank employee should understand that much. I have no idea what you're talking about. Can you please stop saying such nonsense? Do you think I'm not serious? Serious or not, my father's estate has nothing to do with you, I said, and Jason stormed out. Maybe he was angry because things didn't go his way, but I don't care anymore. To say such a thing so casually, bragging about being an elite is on a whole different level. At such a time, I can't imagine continuing to live with someone who says such inconsiderate things. As I was pondering what to do, about 20 minutes later, Jason came back and put a divorce paper in front of me, already signed by him. Perhaps he went to get it just now. He must think he doesn't need a wife who won't do as he wishes. Well, that makes things quicker. See? Now you understand I'm serious. Yeah, I got it. Well, that's straightforward. You should have been like this from the start. Jason nodded with satisfaction at my response and went into another room. He was strangely smirking that night, and I briefly wondered if he was thinking about something different than I was, but I didn't touch on that topic and just let the evening pass. The next day, when Jason went to work, I quickly packed my personal belongings and went back to my parents' house. I explained the situation to my mother and aunt, and submitted it immediately, then headed to the bank where Jason worked. Usually out for sales, Jason was unusually inside the bank that day. Well, that was convenient. When he saw my face, he smirked. I acted as if nothing was wrong and went to the counter, smiling brightly. I'd like to cancel all the accounts our company has with your bank. What? Since Jason was watching, I made sure he could hear it too. He panicked and rushed over to me. Hey, what are you saying? Don't joke around, this is my workplace. You're not making any sense. I know what I'm doing. We're getting a divorce, so I thought I'd withdraw all the accounts. What? Probably, he was not expecting that answer. He must have been absolutely sure I would never go through with a divorce. From my point of view, I wonder if there's any woman who wouldn't divorce after being told such things. Between the divorce and canceling the accounts, Jason was probably panicking by now. What do you mean, we're getting a divorce? Well, you said it. If I didn't like handing over my father's estate, we should get divorced. So I didn't like it, and I just filed those divorce papers. Wait, that was a joke, right? No one actually files for divorce over something like that. Jason, you signed the divorce papers yourself and shoved them at me. Jason looked dumbfounded for a moment. What is there to be confused about? He handed me the divorce papers himself. What did he think, that I wouldn't actually file them? Did he think I was just a woman who would do whatever he said, seriously underestimating me? Although I was listening to his bragging and casually praising him, maybe he thought I was seriously praising him. No way, I was just reading the script, so he should be able to tell that there was no real emotion in it. Why? I don't get it at all? Well, obviously it's divorce then. Huh? Seriously? Divorce, and account cancellation? Why? Who would stay married and hand over the parents' estate to the husband? Here is one, right? Hell, no. I was so angry that I couldn't help but speak harshly. What would I do if my dignity was doubted? Really, I just want him to give me a break. But you can't live without me, right? Excuse me? Really, did he actually believe that? I can't believe this foolish husband. He really overdid it. To you, I'm your proud husband. You're totally in love with me and don't want to leave me, right? I was at a loss for words at his statement. Isn't it embarrassing to say such things without shame? What is going on inside his head? I'm just astonished. Oh no. I couldn't help but let out a deep sigh. Anyway, the divorce papers have been filed, so you and I will be strangers in several months. Just make sure the account cancellation is processed properly. No future dealings with a bank that employs someone like you. Wait. What are you saying? Even if we get divorced, the company's account has nothing to do with it. You're just an accounting clerk. What right do you have to say such things? Oh, right. I hadn't mentioned it. I do the accounting, but I just became the president of the company. What? I hadn't told my husband something. The company I worked for was originally started by my mother's father, my grandfather. I joined my grandfather's company with the intention of taking it over from the start. I didn't assume I would naturally take over just because I was the grandchild, and I didn't want others to think so either. That's why I hid the fact that I was the granddaughter and just got a job and worked hard like everyone else. I kept it hidden partly because there was another reason why I hadn't told my husband about it. My grandparents had divorced when my mother was a child. My mother was raised by my grandmother. The reason for their divorce was that my grandfather, who had just started the company, was always busy and irritable, often taking it out on my grandmother. Eventually, their feelings drifted apart, leading to divorce. For my mother, the memories of my grandfather were always of him yelling, a frightening presence, so she rarely wanted to see him. Hearing this, I became a bit curious about what kind of person he was, and I decided to meet him when I entered high school. My first impression of my grandfather was completely different from what I had heard. He seemed very calm. He appeared strict yet kind. It seemed he had long regretted being too absorbed in his work and neglecting his family. Since the family had fallen apart because of him, he couldn't bring himself to contact us, and he was very happy when I visited him. I often heard stories about managing the company from my grandfather, which gradually sparked my interest in business management. After graduating from university, I joined my grandfather's company without hesitation, and my mother didn't object. At my wedding, my grandfather and my mother reunited, holding hands and crying. When I joined the company, my grandfather was already 72 years old and had stepped down as president to become the chairman, with the managing director who had supported him taking over as president. However, that president fell ill 3 years ago. Fortunately, it wasn't serious, but since then, I had been supporting, or rather being supported by, the president while doing accounting and becoming involved in running the company. And just last month, I became the president. My father was very happy about it. I hadn't made it public yet because I wanted to wait until all the internal transitions were complete. Wait a minute. You're the president? I'm hearing this for the first time. Are you kidding? It's true, well, although it's just a medium-sized company with an annual turnover of about $100 million as you always say. You're the president and the chairman's granddaughter? Why didn't you say that earlier? That changes everything. What changes? Then, even if you don't inherit your father's estate, I won't divorce you. What kind of reasoning is that? Doesn't he listen to people at all? I already said I had filed for divorce, which means we would be divorced in several months. How can he not understand that, and yet he calls himself an elite banker? That reminded me again of what my grandfather had said. Men often lose their drive or become servile when they think their wives have money. It's best not to tell your husband about you becoming president until it becomes publicly undeniable. Just as I was reflecting on this, the branch manager came over looking pale. Excuse me. I hear that you are thinking about canceling all your accounts here. It seemed that a bank employee who had overheard our conversation had informed the branch manager. I'm sorry for the disturbance. Please proceed with the account cancellation process. For more details, Please ask Mr. Parker here. Jason. What on earth is going on? Well, this is. There was no point in arguing here, so I left. Well, I had said what I needed to say, and I had plenty of other things to do. I couldn't stay here any longer. Changing banks is quite a hassle, but I couldn't continue dealing with a bank that employs such a man. Plus, I was planning to make various changes in the company, so it felt like a fresh start. As I was walking away. Wait for me. Oh no. Hearing a voice, I turned around to see my husband chasing after me, crying, and then he started apologizing there. I really wish he'd stop. People around us were looking at us as if something was happening. It was quite embarrassing. Stop it, please. Please reconsider the divorce. Without you, I have no standing. Is his status more important than our divorce? I felt like retorting, but I didn't even want to speak to him anymore. I just wanted to get away from this situation. That's none of my business. Please, it's not just about the account cancellation, my elite life is falling apart. I told you, I don't know. I ran away from my still pleading husband. I don't know why I had to run, but being faced with a man crying and apologizing in public was too much for me, given the curious stares. I guess I'm still not very brave. Afterward, my husband tried to contest the divorce, but it didn't go through. The divorce form unmistakably bore my husband's signature, written just the day before. His plea that he hadn't intended to divorce was not accepted. It was good I filed it immediately. If I had waited, there might have been a chance for him to claim he no longer intended to divorce. The bank transition went smoothly, and I publicly announced my presidency. My ex-husband was demoted because of this incident. Apparently, as I suspected, his sales performance had been declining, and he couldn't secure new clients, although he had boasted to others that he was about to land a big contract. He had been completely depending on my parents' assets. After our exchange at the bank, my ex-husband's schemes became widely known, and he was looked down upon at the bank. It's your fault I lost my position. Take responsibility. He made such an absurd phone call, but I ignored it completely. Eventually, he couldn't withstand the cold treatment from those around him and left the bank. Now he is almost living reclusively at his parents' house, and recently my former mother-in-law called complaining. It's embarrassing to the neighbors, I wish he would leave. To which I responded. Spoiling him led to such selfishness, didn't it? She was speechless. I haven't heard from her since. I am now fully engaged with my work. I don't have time to deal with my ex-husband. But soon, I'm looking forward to having a meal with my grandfather and mother. That's my greatest joy right now, and I plan to continue devoting myself even more to my work. My name is Tracy. I'm 39 years old and I enjoy watching movies with my husband during breaks from parenting and household chores. I feel fortunate that we can keep the romance alive and not just be husband and wife but lovers. Like before we were married. My friends often tell me. My husband treats me more like a mom than a lover or wife. Tracy, I'm so jealous. It's not bad being in a couple's mood no matter the age. I hope we can keep this relationship going in the future. We never fight, but there was one time when our relationship nearly reached a breaking point. It happened when we were still in our 20s. Brian said, "Should we get married soon?" About 6 months into our relationship. Brian, who was still just my boyfriend at the time, suddenly proposed. He said it as casually as if he were suggesting going to the store. He proposed while we were watching TV in my room, so naturally, there was no mood. And it wasn't the romantic proposal I had dreamed of. But this genuine, unforced proposal felt very us, and I liked that. I immediately accepted his proposal, and we decided to get married. We had been dating for 6 months. I didn't know everything about him, but I knew his character well enough. I thought I could be happy with him, but then, 3 weeks after his proposal, he said with a troubled look, "Something complicated has come up." His unusually exhausted expression made me worried, too. "What's wrong?" I asked. "My sister, she wants to meet you." "Huh? We'll go to greet her for the marriage, right?" "We'll meet her then." "Yes, but she wants to meet just us before the greeting." "Oh, that's nice. I'm happy she wants to meet." "Well, it's a bit complicated with my family." "What do you mean?" Brian reluctantly started to explain something quite serious for me. Who was about to marry into his family. Apparently, his family was quite wealthy. His father had won the lottery when he was single, and used that money to start a candy company in their hometown. Gradually, their store became established in the community, and now they have second and third stores in the county. "Wow," I said, and he chuckled bitterly, "Just nouveau riche." His tone was harsher than humble. "That's not like him. You don't have to talk about your family like that." "No, that's really how it is. My dad's sense of money is skewed because of that sudden wealth. And my sister, she's like that, too." "Oh. I can't explain it well, but because they're such a troublesome family. I'm actually worried about introducing you to them during the marriage meeting." He's usually a calm person who never speaks ill of others. It was surprising and increasingly worrying to hear him speak so harshly about his own family. What kind of troublesome family were they, I wondered. But I'm generally positive. I told him, "It's okay, I'd love to meet your sister since we have the chance." He reluctantly agreed, "If you say so." So came the day I first met his sister, Jenny. I was wrong. I was speechless at the tyrannical behavior of the sister-in-law. She looked every bit the wealthy person, from her appearance. Even I, who am not familiar with brands, could tell she was carrying a famous brand bag. And her accessories included large gemstones. I couldn't tell the brands of her clothes and shoes since they didn't have visible logos. But they must all be branded, too. Why do I assume that? Because Brian had told me beforehand that his sister didn't work and was still receiving an allowance from her parents while living at home, even though she was nearing 30. Such a winner in the unemployed world, a super elite unemployed. She said to me during the meal, "I had someone I wanted Brian to marry." She's a friend of mine, from a wealthy family, too." Okay. Stop it, sis." Confused me, and the sister-in-law who was proceeding with the conversation as if she didn't care. And Brian chiding her, quickly cooled the atmosphere between the three of us. "When I told you that discussion was over," Brian said, and she snapped, "Don't talk back to your sister. You should just listen to what your sister says." The younger son born later. "Marriage is my choice." No, you always sulk so easily. You're really the most selfish one in our family." In this house, a reasonable argument is interpreted as selfishness. And it seems they are people who don't hesitate to impose unreasonable demands. Brian sighed deeply with genuine annoyance. "We've met with Tracy now, so let's go home," and he got up from his seat. He went to pay first. I quickly followed him and took out my wallet. Meanwhile, the sister-in-law made no move to take out hers, even though she was the one who had invited us today. The younger brother who was invited ended up paying for his sister's meal. I couldn't help but think that it's really the sister-in-law who is the selfish one. "Give me your contact information, Tracy." Saying this, the sister-in-law reached for her phone. not even bothering to pull out her wallet. Ah, yes. Reluctantly, I gave her my contact because she's his sister after all. Brian had told me repeatedly not to give it to her. But she's going to be my family by marriage. I couldn't just snub her. However, I was wrong again. 2 days after our meeting, I received an email from the sister-in-law that read, "I've decided my brother will marry my friend after all. I've arranged for them to meet, so please step aside." I was alone in my room when I read it, but I couldn't help but say aloud, "What is this?" Should I reply? Ignoring it didn't seem right. But what could I possibly respond to such a message? As I was pondering this, more emails from the sister-in-law kept coming in. "I do not accept you as part of our family. You and he are not a good match. I want him to marry someone decent so that she can support me after our parents are gone. Don't interfere." It seemed she had no intention of working, and fully expected her brother to support her in the future. I didn't reply to her emails and immediately informed Brian. As soon as he saw the emails, his face went pale, and upon questioning him, he confessed. "My sister introduced her friend to me. I thought the emails were just lies and threats to break us up. But apparently, she was serious. What about me? Am I going to be dumped? There's no way that's going to happen." Brian exclaimed angrily. "Sorry for raising my voice. No, it's okay. But I have no intention of marrying her friend. And what's with these emails? I don't even plan to support my sister. Yet she's making all these arrangements behind my back." Seeing him so angry at his sister's actions, I felt relieved. Unlike his sister, he was truly a decent person. 2 weeks passed. He told me to block his sister's emails, but I thought that would be too much and didn't do it. Since then, I haven't received any more emails from her. He also firmly refused to date the woman his sister was pushing. The situation was troublesome because the woman took a liking to him, and the sister-in-law was eager to set them up. But you can't just proceed with something ignoring the person's will. Unexpected obstacles had come up. But today was finally the day of our marriage introduction. That meant meeting his parents. My parents were also coming. Brian suggested, "Maybe we should just call it off? It's not going to end well anyway." But that wasn't acceptable. I wanted to do things properly. Just because the sister-in-law is crazy doesn't mean his parents aren't respectable. He told me not to expect much. But you don't know until you meet them. However, it was a mistake for the 3rd time. "Nice to meet you. You're Tracy?" "Yes, nice to meet you, please take care of me." Brian's father looked at me sternly. That look alone told me they didn't think well of me. Brian's mother gave a small nod, and right next to her, the sister-in-law smirked and said, "Long time no see, Tracy." There was zero welcoming mood. It was a surprising no response. How could they dislike me without even meeting me? It must be the sister-in-law's doing. Where are Tracy's parents? My mother is working today. She'll join us as soon as she finishes. My father is stuck in traffic. I'm sorry for making you wait on such an important day. Really now, we're taking time out of our busy schedules to be here. With that, Brian's father snorted. I could only apologize, feeling down, but Brian reassured me, "Don't worry about it." Trying to ease the tension, I suggested, "Shall we start the meal?" "Of course," said his father. It felt uncomfortable, though. Such a tense atmosphere. "I've been looking forward to the food here," said the sister-in-law excitedly as she looked around the restaurant. Brian's mother added, "I wanted to come here too, but it's always been hard to get a reservation." Today's meeting place was a famous old high-end restaurant in the neighboring town, featured on TV. The French cuisine made from organic vegetables and local fresh meat and fish is superb. And despite the price, it has many repeat customers. Reservations are necessary, and it's so popular that it's hard to book, making a second visit difficult for many. Trying to improve my image, Brian explained to his family. Tracy managed to get the reservation. Wow, you managed to get it. His mother looked surprised. I laughed. Thanks to him, the atmosphere seemed a bit more relaxed at first. That's good, I thought, and then. By the way, what do your parents do for work, Tracy? Brian's father asked. I don't even know, Brian added. What? You don't know what your girlfriend's parents do? I'm not dating her parents, so it doesn't matter. What if her family wants you to take over their business? Then that's fine by me, I guess. You know, Howard may be the heir, but you're also an important son to our family, Brian's father said. In response to his father's words, Brian retorted with annoyance. You mean an important tool, right? It's my life, let me live it how I want. Howard, who was absent that day, is his brother. Unlike Brian, who often clashes with his family, Howard seems to get along very well with them, and has been directly appointed by his father to take over the company. Really, I wanted to stabilize the company by marrying him off to a wealthy girl, his father grumbled. Jenny chimed in condescendingly, such a disgrace to the parents. I don't want to be lectured by a sister who's still clinging to her parents' apron strings, Brian retorted, causing his mother to remain silent. The atmosphere was terrible. Girls should just stay home and take care of the house. Don't worry, Jenny, I'll find you a good match soon enough. Papa, you're the best. With that, Jenny smiled, not entirely displeased by her father's words. Seeing this, I thought, like father, like daughter. Brian sighed. It's embarrassing how his disreputable family behaves in their usual manner in front of his fiancée. So, getting back to the subject, Tracy's parents are. Just as his father tried to steer the conversation back, a waiter appeared and announced, Your guest has arrived, followed by my father peeking through. Sorry for being late, my father apologized, dressed in a suit. Even the usually rude father-in-law couldn't afford to be disrespectful in front of my father, who was slightly older, managing only a terse, no. The roads were so congested, and my car isn't comfortable at all. My back is killing me from the long drive, my father laughed heartily. What kind of car do you drive? The father-in-law asked. A light truck. I'm a farmer, so I often need to carry soil. Can't really drive anything flashy. Thanks to that, I'm on my third light truck. Just keep buying them over and over. My father laughed again, while the father-in-law's face seemed permanently contorted. What did you say now? He demanded with a demonic glare, causing me and my father to look puzzled. Is there a problem with a light truck? Would a large pickup truck have been more acceptable? You said you're a farmer? Yes. My father nodded several times, visibly intimidated by the father-in-law's stare. In between, Brian said positively, Oh, you're a farmer, and I smiled, yes. Unbelievable. The father-in-law stood up abruptly and slammed the table hard. Not only us, but other customers also looked shocked. Jenny was right, love marriages are worthless. Bringing such a despicable poor person into our family. I couldn't believe my ears. Is he calling me a despicable poor person? Isn't that extremely rude? Brian, cut ties with this woman right now. I will not accept her as my daughter-in-law. What? It's not up to you to choose my partner. No. Her family is nowhere near a match for ours. What do you mean, not a match? You act like a local dignitary. But you're just nouveau riche from a lottery win. That's when my father stepped in. I'm sorry, but why must you say such things? The father-in-law snorted through his nose. If you don't even understand that, you're even less suitable as a spouse. It's just a farmer, you know? A farmer. What's wrong with being a farmer? Day in, day out, covered in mud, crawling on the ground just like a lowly citizen. Probably best friends with moles and worms. It's outrageous to come to a high-end restaurant in a light truck. Isn't it embarrassing that you've proven yourself to be such a poor person? With no common sense? I don't think my job is as lowly as you say, and while I might understand a dress code, I don't think there's one for cars. What's wrong with a light truck? After all, my parents and I are not the same entity. Oh please, the howling of the poor. Stop whining and go back to being poor. The marriage is off. With that, the father-in-law slammed the table again. Brian was arguing back. But it seemed there was no reasoning with this stubborn father-in-law. My father probably felt the same. Shall we go? He looked at me as if to say, give up, and I steeled myself. Yeah. Taking my response, he stood up. Then, we'll be leaving. Go, go. I'll pay for the meal of the poor, so just disappear quickly. The father-in-law shouted abusively. Brian was angry, demanding his father stop, but his words fell on deaf ears. Don't defy your parents, he screamed. And then threw a framed picture from the wall at us. The sudden display of violence from the father-in-law froze us all in place. Even the waiter, carrying soup, was stunned by the overturned bowl. Jenny seemed a bit surprised but smirked, serves you right, as she looked at us. Such a spiteful nature. The mother-in-law, witnessing all this, did nothing to admonish Jenny or her husband. Brian, dismayed by the situation, apologized. Sorry for making you feel bad. I'll get in touch properly. And urged me to go home for the day. After leaving the restaurant with my father, my cell phone rang a short while later as we drove away. The caller was the sister-in-law, Jenny. Why would she call at this time? I thought. And while I casually checked my bag to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything, my phone rang again. Dad, I'm getting a call from that lady over there. Just ignore it. But she's really persistent. Look, it stopped, but now she's calling again. Well, I guess you have to answer it then. I sighed, resigned, and answered the call from Jenny. Hello? Jenny? Finally, you answered. Please, I'm begging you, come back to the restaurant. Jenny sounded nearly hysterical on the phone. What on earth was going on? Huh? What's suddenly come up? You were the ones who told us to leave. Well, I don't really understand. But the restaurant staff said they won't forgive you unless they apologize to you. Oh. Hearing that, I couldn't help but smile wryly. I see, that's what this is about. I chuckled inwardly, thinking things were getting interesting. Could it be that the picture frame that your father threw got broken? Yes. Not only that, but the spilled soup stained the painting inside it. Oh dear. That sounds like an expensive item was ruined. Now they're saying we have to compensate for it. But they might forgive you if you apologize. What kind of relationship do you have with the restaurant staff? They keep telling me to ask you directly, and won't tell me anything. That restaurant is run by our relatives. What? Didn't you find it strange? A popular restaurant that usually requires a year's reservation. And yet, we managed to book for 2 families within a month of the proposal. Now that you mention it. It was because it's run by relatives. We were lucky to get seats due to a cancellation. And by the way, my mother works there too. Remember the person who brought the soup? That was my mother. What? That person, she's the one saying you need to apologize. She probably saw everything and got angry on our behalf. I don't really understand, but please come back to the restaurant. I was about to say no when Jenny let out a small squeal. What now? Tracy? Please, I'm begging you, come back to the restaurant. Brian's father had taken the phone. Their pleas sounded so similar, I couldn't help but laugh a little. I decided to let my dad join the conversation and switched my phone to speaker mode. I refuse. Weren't you the one who told us to leave? I retorted with a smirk. I'm sorry. I had no idea you were affiliated with the restaurant. Why would you lie about being a farmer? I wasn't lying. My father is a farmer, and though he's listed as the owner, my aunt actually manages the place. If you had told me earlier. A daughter connected to this restaurant is certainly not a poor person. She's suitable for my son. Let's forget what happened today. And please come into our family. After what's been said, it's too late. What? Are you dissatisfied? It's irritating the way you're speaking. You haven't apologized, and as soon as you find the family is convenient for you, you flip your stance and say to come into your family. It's extremely unpleasant. You dare to act high and mighty. It's also your fault for not behaving like rich people. At that, my father chuckled as Brian's father started to get irate. Do you think acting like a rich person involves yelling? And intimidating someone you think is beneath you? What? What's so fun about flaunting your wealth? If that's all the joy you have, that's pretty sad. What do you mean, acting high and mighty? You're boasting about being wealthy, but what's the point? Is it enjoyable to be envied by others? Or do you want to increase your chances of being robbed? If so, that's quite an unusual hobby. I couldn't help but laugh at my father's pointed comments. Brian's father, clearly infuriated by the response, was huffing and puffing over the phone. My father could almost see his irritated face, and seemed to be enjoying provoking him. Did you deliberately make him angry, Dad? You're still such a mischief maker. Despite offering to accept the marriage, you disregard my generosity. If that's your idea of generosity, we don't need it. Just as my father firmly spoke, Brian's voice resonated through the room. I don't need Dad's approval anyway. I was taken aback and listened intently to the voice. What are you talking about, Brian? Coming out of nowhere, his father said, clearly annoyed. It's fine. Today is the last day I'll deal with Dad anyway. What? What do you mean? I want to marry Tracy, so I'm cutting ties with this family. That's why Dad doesn't need to approve our marriage. What? Do you think such selfishness is allowed? Do you really think you have the right to approve your child's marriage? If you leave the family, who will smooth over the issue with the damaged picture frame at that woman's house? That's why I'm leaving. I'm tired of being used. Brian's angry voice silenced his father. What am I to you, Dad? Expected to support my jobless sister, marry rich for the family. Build connections in case the business fails, never talk back. I'm not a slave. You're the one who never talks back, so I prepared the best life for you. Why would supporting a sister who doesn't work be considered the best life for me? The best life always seems to be reserved for her. Well, I know the reason behind our parents' unhappy marriage. What? My father and I were taken aback. I thought they just didn't talk much, but it seems Brian's parents really didn't get along. Dad, you think I'm not your child, don't you? Brian's father stumbled over his words, and our expressions stiffened. You've been misunderstanding Mom, thinking she had an affair with the store manager? I heard it from Grandma, who passed away. That's not a misunderstanding. Mom was unusually close to that man back then. That's because you were hitting Mom even at the store out of stress from work. And the manager was just looking out for her. I don't know the real story. Mom is innocent. Everyone from that time said so, and my genes say the same. What? I had a DNA test done with Dad. The result showed a 99.9% probability that I am his biological son. A bit disappointing, though. What? Brian's father's voice faded, and his mother intervened. Why can't you? I had a DNA test done between Brian and you too. I showed you the results. But you didn't believe it. I can't believe a word that cheating woman says. Don't say things just because you're convinced of them. I've told you many times, I am innocent. His mother's voice was tearful, likely overwhelmed by years of sorrow. Well, anyone could see she's innocent. I've even talked to the manager's wife, who wasn't suspicious but rather worried about Mom. And yet, because of unfounded accusations, she was driven to resign. It's sad what happened to the manager. Brian sighed. He says his sister and brother resemble their father. But he is said to be like his mother. Shortly before it was known his mother was pregnant, his parents clashed over business management, leading to their discord. His mother had consulted the then manager, asking, "Can everyone really keep up with such management policies?" Brian's father mistook this for an affair, seeing his newly born son's face, thinking, "The older two resemble me, but this one doesn't. He must be the manager's child." For years, he was less loved in the family, yet expected to take care of his sister in the future, treated more like a tool. Worried about Mom, I didn't cut ties with the family. But if I have to choose between such a family and a new one I might build with Tracy, I choose the latter. As of today, I'm cutting ties with this family. Brian, think it over. Say something, Mom. If Brian leaves, Howard will have to take care of Jenny. His declaration panicked his father. Nevertheless, the content of his words was despicable. He repeatedly expressed his desire not to lose a cash cow son. I was wrong, his mother murmured. What? Both his father and sister exclaimed. I kept hoping that eventually, Brian would be acknowledged as your son. That even a marriage for money could turn into one for love. I persisted out of stubbornness. But that was the wrong choice. I've only caused Brian pain. His mother's words left his father slightly trembling. What do you mean? Please divorce me. I can't take it anymore. Brian, be free. I'm sorry for everything. I gave up arguing because nothing got through to you, and that hurt you. Mom. How can such selfishness be allowed? While he was lost for words, his father vociferously claimed his own self-centered views. Even if you don't agree, the law will recognize it. If you won't agree to a divorce, I will take it to court, Brian's mother stated calmly. Wait. Let's calm down, okay? If we talk it out, I'm sure we cannot understand each other. How can you say that? Though we couldn't see him over the phone. His disheartened tone painted a clear picture of Brian's father slumping down. Just when the line went silent, my mother's voice chimed in. "Sorry to interrupt while you're all heated up, but the frame and painting, you'll need to compensate us $80,000, okay?" $80,000. You said it was $50,000. Jenny panicked. No, the painting itself is $50,000, and the frame is $30,000. I felt like you weren't really listening, and it turns out you really weren't. You've got to be kidding. Brian's laughter burst through the phone, replacing Jenny's despairing voice. My father and I also shared a laugh, saying, "What a perfect ending," and then we hung up. Afterward, Brian, as he declared, cut ties with his family and even took my surname, expressing a desire to change his name. My father was overjoyed, saying, "I've gained a son." Soon, Brian might officially become his son-in-law. Following the divorce, Brian's parents separated. His father was not only required to split the assets with his mother, but also had to pay compensation for the emotional distress caused during their marriage, with the obligation to also settle the payments for the frame and painting. It was a significant loss. Though they were wealthy, this level of expense was still notable. Freed from her marriage, Brian's mother felt emboldened, or perhaps more relaxed, and began sharing her past grievances with local people. This chatter ended up on a community online forum, leading to rampant speculation that quickly smeared the store's reputation. Though not bankrupt, customer visits dwindled, and the store, once bustling and handling high-end confectionaries, now echoed emptily. They shifted to selling cheaper sweets in bulk, but even that strategy wasn't hitting the mark, resulting in the closure of their second and third stores. It's hoped that the original store won't go under. Brian's brother, once the designated successor, quit the company to start his own business, refusing to take care of Jenny as suggested. He wanted distance from the family, leading to his resignation. Now, Brian's father struggles to manage the nearly bankrupt shop, and his still dependent daughter, Jenny. Why do we know so much about a family we've cut ties with? Well, after Brian left, his brother, who also distanced himself from their family, came to our wedding celebration. He too was dissatisfied with his family's ways, and celebrated Brian's departure as a joyous occasion. Since he still occasionally hears from his family, we get updates through him. The nouveau riche family, disdainful of farmers, has been steadily declining in a somewhat ironic twist. Since then, my husband and I have had 2 daughters. Despite hearing that girls are less troublesome, they are as mischievous as boys, keeping us up day and night. Born close together, they fought constantly in their younger years, and as they grew, they brought home bugs by the dozens, came back muddy, and had their share of fights with friends. These children never cease to bring me challenging news, but seeing them healthy is what matters most. And though they often fight, they make up quickly. True, they give me quite the headache with their tomboy antics, but watching their sleeping faces at night, I think to myself, I'm glad I had them. And next to me, drooling in his sleep, is my husband, looking adorable to me. Love is truly blind, huh? Soon, our family will grow by one more, aiming for a big family, you know?
Pay back everything, will you? Well, if you do that, you'll be a welfare beggar in the near future. Prepare yourself because I'll also demand compensation. I clenched my fist tightly. Yet, I managed to hold back my anger and said with a smile, "Got it." Indeed, such things need to be settled, right? Then, make sure you check the exact amount I've used, okay? After that, I gave him my address and hurried back home. Phil probably thought I had run away seeing me like that, but I wasn't running away. When Phil contacted me next, I was ready to end everything. That day came much sooner than expected, just 3 days after I saw Phil again. Right away, Phil started bombarding me with urgent calls. But even when I answered, Phil just kept repeating the same words over and over. It seemed that we couldn't resolve anything unless we met in person. So we met again, and there Phil exclaimed. "Why? How? Is this really your house?" The reason for his panic on the phone seemed to be my house. In front of my mansion, Phil truly seemed to have lost his mind. My name is Stacy Manning. Currently, I am a 40-year-old housewife. I met my husband Phil 6 years ago. Introduced by the president of the company I was working for at the time. The president loved to go fishing. One day, while fishing, it seems he met Phil, who had come with a friend by chance. Phil was not interested in fishing. So he apparently spent the time talking with the president, who was there alone. Knowing that he was single, the president thought of me. The reason was that I had lost my parents early and was all alone in the world. Feeling sorry for me, the president, who always looked after me, thought Phil and I could become a family. I couldn't refuse the president's kindness, and when we met, Phil somehow took a liking to me. Thus, we started dating and eventually got married. Now, I have quit my job and become a full-time housewife. Phil was a very kind person. My in-laws were wonderful, too, treating me just like their real daughter, and for me, who had lost my parents, they were like real parents. Phil's house was a duplex. The in-laws had built it new when they got married, and after Phil's grandparents passed away. One half of the duplex became vacant, so Phil and I moved in there. Although we lived separately, we often saw my in-laws and had a good relationship with them. However, there was one discomfort I couldn't quite get rid of regarding the relationship between Phil and my in-laws. Apparently, Phil's father had become ill a few years ago and was living in a wheelchair. Phil seemed not to care about his father at all. For example, the day we first met face to face. When we arrived at the designated restaurant, a man in a wheelchair couldn't get over a step and was struggling. I helped him over that step. Later, I learned that the man was Phil's father. At that time, my mother-in-law had told Phil to stay with his father and went to the restroom. Despite that, Phil had left his father alone and gone to the restroom as well. Phil. I told you to stay with your dad. Where were you? Mother-in-law said, but there was no sign of remorse in Phil. I felt a moment of discomfort, but Phil praised me, saying, "Indeed, Stacy is a wonderful woman." Even though she didn't know he was my father, she helped him. I momentarily forgot the discomfort I felt. Looking back now, there were many such incidents. After all, I wasn't informed beforehand that Phil's father was wheelchair-bound. Nor did I question why a restaurant with many steps was chosen. Recently, while dining with 4 people, Phil suddenly suggested, "Why don't we try mountain climbing?" I was taken aback. In any case, Phil showed no consideration for his father. Phil. Isn't it thoughtless to suggest such a thing when your father can barely walk? I told Phil that the night he suggested the mountain climb. However, he just laughed. Dad can't make it. I know that. He just doesn't have to come. Even if he doesn't come, it's too much to leave him alone. It's cruel to suggest a trip he can't even take. Then, Stacy, you can stay and keep him company. I was dumbfounded by his words. No matter what I argued, Phil never seemed to listen. Each time Phil spoke, I continued to feel guilty towards his father. However, the story didn't end there. One day, forgetting such a conversation, Phil suddenly said he was going on a trip just with his mother. Since Stacy is here, Dad will be fine, right? Leaving those words behind, he really went away with his mother. My mother-in-law thought I had agreed, saying, "Stacy, call me if anything happens. Thank you for this time." She smiled happily, so I couldn't say anything. After silently seeing them off, I apologized to Phil's father for his son's selfish actions. "Thank you for always caring. It's my fault for getting sick. So you don't have to worry, Stacy." Father-in-law said so with a smile. That smile somewhat comforted me, but I still felt uneasy as I awaited Phil's return. After that, whether it was lunch or dinner, Phil planned numerous trips, always going out just with his mother. But I always feel bad for Stacy. Mother-in-law would say so, but Phil responded kindly. "Normally, Mom takes care of him, right? It's fine once in a while." Stacy says so, too. I certainly don't recall saying such things, but I cannot deny them either. Every time the two of them went out, I was left to take care of my father-in-law and keep him company. I felt sorry for my father-in-law, and it seemed he felt sorry for me as well. Then, 2 years later, my father-in-law finally passed away. At the funeral, engulfed in sorrow, I heard Phil's unbelievable remark. "Finally freed. An old man in a wheelchair is nothing but a burden." Well, but someone appeared to take that burden, so it was good I didn't have to do anything. It seems like Mom was saved thanks to him, better him than no one. I trembled with anger. Such a kind father-in-law is called a burden? And someone to bear that burden? It was the moment I finally understood what Phil really thought of me. He must have enjoyed the trips with his beloved mother. He ignored the feelings of my father-in-law and me during those times. Even though I wanted children, Phil had said, I still want it to be just the two of us. But we hardly had any time just the two of us. It must have been an excuse, thinking that if I got pregnant and gave birth, I wouldn't be able to take care of him. I was so frustrated and ashamed that I cried quietly by myself, but this was a funeral. I was grateful that everyone left me alone as I cried. Of course, my mother-in-law probably didn't mean that. At the funeral, my mother-in-law's sad face didn't seem like an act. I understood that she was happy being invited by Phil, and she always brought me souvenirs. Of course, my mother-in-law needed to reflect on her actions too. But it seemed she also had regrets since my father-in-law had passed away. But, if Phil had thought it through more, he wouldn't have dragged my mother-in-law into such a whirlpool of regret. The more I thought of him as the root cause of everything, the more unforgivable it seemed. Since that incident, we became a couple only by name. We talked in front of my mother-in-law to avoid worrying her. But when it was just the two of us, we were like air to each other. Eventually, I didn't even care whether Phil was at home or not. Presumably, he was out with my mother-in-law, and now that my father-in-law was gone, I had no right to say anything. However, one day, Phil was not at home, but my mother-in-law was. "Huh? Mother, you're not with Phil today?" At those words, my mother-in-law tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "Since your father passed away, I haven't gone out with him. I've made it clear to refuse." "Huh? I told him to treasure you more than me." Phil agreed and said he would take good care of his wife. I was shocked at those words. Taking care of his wife? He didn't even talk to me, yet he said such things to please my mother-in-law. I said, "I'm sorry to say this, but there's no love between us anymore. Taking care of his wife is out of the question. I can't imagine Phil taking care of his wife." "That's so." My mother-in-law seemed genuinely shocked by this revelation. But I couldn't stand it anymore. Even pretending to be a happy couple was painful. But then, where is Phil going? He's hardly ever home anymore, day or night. Indeed. I thought he was always out with you. We looked at each other. Now that we realized we both thought he was with the other, where was Phil really going? That day, I confronted Phil when he returned home late. You're late. Where have you been until this time? Phil stopped dead when I spoke to him. He hadn't expected me to say anything when it was just the two of us. I was out dining with Mom. Phil mumbled his answer, obviously a big lie. If he was with his mother, I wouldn't have said anything. Knowing this, he must have used that excuse. But not today. If it was with your mother, she was actually at home. Which mother did you dine with? What's with that tone? It sounds so sarcastic. Sarcastic? You're the one who lied, what do you think? I retorted to Phil. Phil sighed heavily and then said to me, does it matter where? I deserve a break once in a while. A break? You hardly come home after work, and on your days off, you're always out. You pushed the care of your father onto me even when he was alive. I snapped, raising my voice. Phil seemed to have something on his mind in response to my words. But since it was true, he couldn't retort. Desperate, Phil also raised his voice.
Ah.
Shut up, you nag. Mom likes you, so even though you were no longer needed, I kept you here. If you have so many complaints, just leave. Such terrible words. But I desperately controlled my anger. Thinking I had nothing to say, Phil said triumphantly. You'd be in trouble, right? Where would a housewife with no relatives go if I threw you out, huh? But you defied me. I have no reason to support you anymore. As the insults continued, my heart nearly broke. I didn't regret complaining to Phil. I didn't expect him to understand. But he had no right to say these things. If you're leaving, that's perfect. There's another woman who wants to marry me. I wouldn't be troubled if a woman like you disappeared. What? Are you saying you've been cheating? I, who had been silent, returned words at that. Cheating? Don't accuse me of anything I haven't done. But you just said there's a woman who wants to marry you.
Yeah.
I'm serious. It's a good opportunity for you to leave and for me to remarry. And so, we ended up getting divorced. Only my mother-in-law kept crying and apologizing, which made my eyes well up too. From meeting at 35 to divorcing at 40, I think I truly wasted some precious years. But from here on, I think of it as a new life and I'm determined to do my best. About a year after the divorce, I finally got used to my new life and regained a peaceful existence. The president of my previous company, knowing my situation, rehired me. And work was going well. One day, on my way home from work, I stopped at the supermarket. I was tired and reached for half-priced food. Then, I spotted my favorite cheesecake in the discount section and stopped. Just as a familiar voice reached my ears. I thought it was some disgraceful old hag. I looked up at the voice. There was Phil, brazenly peering into my basket and laughing. Lonely, huh? A discounted food, really? It's none of your business. As I grabbed the cheesecake and tried to leave, Phil said. Oh, right. You used Dad's savings, didn't you? Your father's savings? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie. You were buying stuff like diapers when you were taking care of him, right? I was surprised by his words. Of course. Besides, I had permission from his parents for that. They had asked me to buy those things, so there was no reason for Phil to say such things now. That was. I tried to respond, but Phil smirked triumphantly. Pay back everything, will you? Well, if you do that, you'll be a welfare beggar in the near future. Prepare yourself because I'll also demand compensation. I clenched my fist tightly. Yet, I managed to hold back my anger and said with a smile. Got it. Indeed, such things need to be settled, right? Then, make sure you check the exact amount I've used, okay? Putting on a brave face. Phil laughed, but I didn't rise to his provocation. And quickly took out a memo from my bag to write down my address. Also, I live here now. We need to have a discussion, so please contact me later. I quickly finished speaking, handed over the address, and hurried home. Phil probably thought I had run away seeing me like that, but I wasn't running away. The next time Phil contacted me, I was ready to end everything. I had made up my mind. It happened just 3 days after our reunion. I was at work. Suddenly, I noticed that Phil had been calling me repeatedly. I wondered if something had happened. Just then, another call came in. I hurriedly answered, thinking something might have happened to my mother-in-law. Hello? What's going on? Over the phone, Phil shouted. What is this? What? I'm outside your house right now. What the hell is going on? I didn't understand what he meant. But Phil was muttering something, almost in a frenzy. Had he gone mad? Though I felt his madness, I asked calmly again. You're in front of my house? I'm sorry, but I'm at work. Are you talking about the discussion? I don't care about the discussion. What do you mean by all this? We were completely at odds. I sighed deeply. It seemed that nothing had happened to my mother-in-law, at least. We can't resolve this over the phone, let's meet and talk. I'll be home in 3 hours. I said this while checking my watch and hung up. Phil called a few more times, but I ignored all his calls. When I hurried home after work and approached my house, I saw Phil waiting there. Have you been here all this time? Noticing me, Phil approached with a furious expression and raised his voice. What does this mean? What about? You need to specify. Hearing my words, Phil pointed at my house and opened his mouth again. Why? How? Can you live in such a magnificent house? Phil said this, spitting as he emphasized his words. I recoiled involuntarily. Did you run off with Dad's inheritance? What are you talking about? Of course not. Phil attacked me fiercely, but I brushed it off lightly. It's my parents' money. However, he was not convinced. Your parents? Weren't they long gone? Were you lying? Calm down a bit. Okay? This is the house built with the real estate income inherited from my parents. It's impossible that I stole any money from your parents. Finally, it seemed Phil understood a bit and regained some composure. Yes. It's true that my parents passed away early. However, they came from a family that owned a lot of real estate. And after their deaths, being an only child, I inherited all of it. The income from these properties is a staggering $3 million per year. Money keeps flowing in even without me doing anything. And my total assets amount to several tens of millions of dollars. Of course, I could live comfortably without working. But what I really wanted was something money can't buy, human warmth. The reason I worked was more for the warmth of eating lunch with colleagues or supporting each other through mistakes than for the income. Being completely alone, if I had distanced myself from society just because I had money, I would have truly been alone. When I was married and a housewife, I felt the warm love of my in-laws and was happy. Because of the divorce, I returned to work to maintain my social connections. I explained this to Phil and then added. But if I say I have money, everyone comes flocking for it. I was really happy when Phil liked me without knowing I was so wealthy. Well, probably because I was a caregiver. That is. After hearing my story, Phil regained his composure. At the same time, it seemed he regretted having driven me away. He tried to appear calm, but his face was pale, and his voice trembled. But it wasn't what anyone would do. I thought you looked kind, so I felt I could leave my father in her care confidently. He muttered some plausible excuse and nodded as if to convince himself. By the way, if you had so much money, you should have told me. Why? What difference would it make if I told you, Phil? Well, that is, like managing it. Phil seemed desperate to get involved with the wealth, but it was too late. I smiled slightly and said, if we had had a child, they would have been the ones to inherit it. Too bad, huh? Phil seemed to feel even more regret at my words, but still had no response. I continued, almost like delivering the final blow. It's late today, can we possibly discuss this another time? Was it about settling the caregiving expenses during our marriage? Oh.
Yeah.
That's right, we need to settle that properly. Tormented by regret, Phil seemed to find some hope in my words and briskly looked up. However, the next moment, he would be plunged back into despair. That's great. I paid quite a bit for your father's hospital fees. If I can get reimbursed, that would really help me. What? Phil froze for a moment, turning even paler. Watching his reaction, I rapidly continued. I had covered the hospital fees, right? It was about $10,200 over 3 years. Well, it was my own decision, so let's say just $10,000 is fine. And then, was it about the diapers from your father's savings that I used on my own? I think it was about $1,000, right? So, subtract that, and you just pay me $9,000. I could hardly suppress a laugh as Phil found himself unable to say anything. During the caregiving, my in-laws had said, we feel bad that you're paying for hospital fees, we should at least cover something. I never intended to make my in-laws pay. But I thought it would make my father-in-law feel even more indebted if I covered everything. That's why I had them break into the savings just for the diaper expenses. And even then, it wasn't always for diapers. If assisted, my father-in-law could go to the bathroom. It wasn't a huge amount spent on diapers, but Phil's nitpicking brought about this situation. And about compensation? I'm not sure what compensation you're talking about, but if anyone should receive it, wouldn't it be me, the one who was cheated on? With those words sounding like a final blow, Phil collapsed on the spot. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Then he groveled on the ground, but such an act was meaningless. If you have something to say, we can hear it at the next meeting. I left these words behind, leaving Phil groveling as I returned alone to my large mansion. A few days later, I contacted a lawyer. I doubted he would bother me again. But just to be sure, I wanted to sever all ties with Phil completely. The lawyer listened to my story and acted immediately. When I visited Phil's house for the first time in a year, a young woman came out. May I help you? Is Phil here? I'm his ex-wife. After hearing this, she looked at me with discomfort and went back inside. In her place, Phil came out. Good, you're here. I've called many times without response. So I decided to come directly to your house for a discussion, just like you did. As I said this, Phil began to fumble. So, I apologized, didn't I? What value does your apology have? You contacted me to settle up, right? It might be awkward to be overheard by the neighbors, so I'll come in. Conceding, Phil stepped aside to let me into the house. However, I was shocked by the state of the house I entered for the first time in a year. What is this? The hallway looked as if it hadn't been cleaned in days, with visible footprints in the dust. Used cardboard boxes were left abandoned in the already narrow corridor. Cautiously, I peeked into the living room where the young woman I saw earlier was sprawled on the sofa, absorbed in her smartphone, surrounded by scattered laundry. Phil, trying to prevent me from seeing the state of the living room, hurriedly closed the door. Since Claire is here, I guess this place will do. It appears that the woman from earlier was indeed Claire, Phil's new wife. Phil led me to the entrance and suggested we talk there. I sighed at his words. Given the state of things, it couldn't be helped. What's with all this mess, anyway? I couldn't help but voice my concern. Phil gave a forced laugh and said, "Well, I just haven't gotten around to cleaning." But it looked more like he never cleaned at all. I had many thoughts but decided not to delve too deeply. Getting involved was the last thing I wanted. Later, the lawyer graciously compiled the details we had discussed into documents. I was seeking a settlement of $9,000 I had spent, and $20,000 in compensation for being driven out due to the affair, totaling $29,000. Like before, Phil turned pale and begged for mercy on his knees. "There's no way I can forgive you," I retorted. As we were exchanging words, Claire appeared from the living room. "What's all the commotion?
Ah.
What does the ex-wife want?" It was getting complicated. I thought so, but if I was to receive compensation, she was not unrelated. The lawyer explained on my behalf. Claire listened silently to the lawyer's explanation. But after everything was explained, she exclaimed loudly, "Huh?" I wondered if the two of them would start making a fuss. But instead, Claire turned to Phil and raised her voice. "You're 41 and still such a pathetic man. You've caused trouble, so you should pay up." But no buts. Claire spoke quite reasonably, which surprised me. "I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience. I wouldn't have caused such a problem if I had known he was married." Then, she apologized. The lawyer and I exchanged glances, wondering what was happening. You didn't know Mr. Phil was married?" "Of course not." I was deceived. It turns out Phil had been deceiving Claire, who was only 20, telling her he was 35. Claire said that when she first came to this house after I had left, she felt suspicious because there were women's items around. However, she was misled at that time, being told they belonged to his mother. But a few months ago, she had a conversation with a neighbor and finally learned she was the second wife. Unable to bear the deceit, she asked for a divorce. But Phil wouldn't accept it, and she had been neglecting household duties since. "It's my fault for being deceived." Claire said this while glaring at Phil, who just smirked. Despite her youth, I couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. "Can't we do something for her?" "I'll pay if it's about money," I asked the lawyer. "What?" "It's none of your business." "What are you saying?" Phil, who had been smirking, suddenly began to panic. "It is my business. I lost 5 years from age 35 to 40. Do you understand how precious those years were to me, someone without children? She's still young. I don't want her to go through what I did." My passion seemed to widen Claire's eyes slightly. Perhaps her stern look was because she had already despaired of life. "Understood. It's up to Ms. Claire now," the lawyer said, turning to her. Then, with a strained voice, she murmured, "I want a divorce." Phil collapsed in despair at Claire's words. He had claimed to be serious about her. If that were truly the case, he should have been honest with her. He was probably only thinking about driving me out and marrying her. Such self-centered behavior was typical of Phil. Is someone here? Just as things were about to be settled, a figure emerged from the back of the house. Mother. Stacy. The mother-in-law appeared much thinner and frail, barely a year since I last saw her. And she came staggering over to me. Then she sat down in front of me. Phil really did something terrible. I owe you more gratitude than I can ever express. She murmured the same words she had a year ago and cried. I felt my eyes well up too, but held back and asked her. More importantly, are you okay? You seem much thinner. Yes. I've been out of money. I haven't been able to eat well lately. What? My bankbook disappeared about a month ago, and I hardly have any money left. I glared at Phil. He started panicking at my gaze. From his reaction, it was clear he was involved in this. What is going on? At my loud voice, Phil flinched. I see. Now it was all becoming clear. Phil must have rummaged through his mother's bankbook and, finding less balance than he expected, assumed I had used the money. That's why he demanded compensation when we met by chance. Never mind. I don't intend to listen to any excuses. No matter what Phil says, it will not quell my anger. Mary, would you like to live with me? Huh? Hey, what are you saying? I ignored Phil and continued speaking to the mother-in-law. If so, why not consider adopting her as your child? The lawyer immediately offered his advice. I was very open to the idea. Tears welled up in the mother-in-law's eyes as she asked me again, is that really okay? Of course. I responded with a smile. Hey, Mom. Don't be deceived by her. You have a son, remember? But Phil was desperate not to lose his mother. The mother-in-law said, Phil is a precious son to me. But Stacy, you were like a daughter to me too. I still can't forgive you for driving her out. Tears streaming down her face, the mother-in-law slowly stood up. Let me just grab my things. And then she slowly disappeared back into the house. Leaving Phil in a daze at the entrance, the lawyer, the mother-in-law, Claire, and I all left the house together. Please watch your step, Mother. As I said this and took her hand, Phil seemed unable to respond. He probably never even bothered to show such consideration. After Claire left him, I received a call from the lawyer that the divorce had been finalized. Apparently, Phil had also been asked to pay compensation. He wanted to use that compensation to pay for my legal fees, but I refused. Claire is still young, and having money won't hurt her. I believe she will use it well for herself. In addition to paying me compensation, Phil had to pay Claire as well. The total compensation to both of us was too high for Phil's salary, and he couldn't even get a loan. Therefore, he took a loan only for Claire's compensation. And I agreed to accept mine in installments. I planned to give it all to my mother-in-law. Phil would now live a lonely life, chasing payments. Having always been self-centered, struggling just to make ends meet might be good for him. Later, I discussed it again with the mother-in-law and completed the adoption process. It's unlikely that Phil, now penniless, would come to take the mother-in-law back. But it seemed better to be prepared in case something happened. After moving in with me, the mother-in-law started regaining her vigor, resembling more of the mother-in-law I knew. Her smiles returned, and I felt truly glad. I'm so glad I met you, Stacy. Hearing this from the mother-in-law made me slightly resentful that it was thanks to Phil. But I want to do my filial duty to her, something I couldn't do for my own parents. Having gone through this experience, I decided to use most of my assets to support children who are also orphans like me, and young people who are despairing about life. Helping others isn't anything grand, but I firmly believe that as long as you keep living, there will come a day when you can laugh again. I want to share the happiness I've felt, and that's what inspired this decision. There's no ticket for you. I'd be embarrassed to be seen with someone from the bottom. Go home before anyone sees you. These were the words spoken to me by my sister-in-law named Erica, at a concert venue where we had come to listen to a classical concert, arranged by my in-laws for the family. The tickets were arranged by Erica, but I was the only one without a ticket. Moreover, she even said, "It's 100 years too early for commoners like you to sit with us at a classical concert. You're an eyesore, so could you just disappear?" Since the beginning of my marriage, I've been disliked by this sister-in-law, Erica, and have been harassed by her. At that moment, someone stood up for me and said, "Then why don't you leave?" My name is Sarah. I am 27 years old and a preschool teacher. My parents live in the countryside, where they run a small restaurant. We are not wealthy, but I believe we are a happy, ordinary family. I met my husband, Greg, at a friend's wedding. We hit it off while talking and started to hang out, including with the couple who introduced us. After his persistent pursuit, our relationship deepened. Eventually, I accepted his proposal. I was overjoyed and felt incredibly happy, but soon I would face an unbelievable issue. As a couple, it was natural to greet each other's parents. With my parents, there was no issue, and they were very happy, saying they were glad to have a reliable son. They even treated us to the restaurant's cuisine. What is this? It's so delicious. He was overly delighted, which made my parents smile fondly. Thus, our visit to my parents' home went smoothly. In contrast, the visit to Greg's parents' home was a different story. His father is the CEO of a major music instrument company, his mother is a pianist, and Greg is the vice president, set to inherit the business. I was nervous due to their affluent and respectable family background. However, upon entering the living room, his parents warmly welcomed us, all but one person. Greg's sister, Erica, stared at me and then started snickering. What's with this person's tacky outfit? It's unbelievable to come to greet someone in that. What brand is it? She rudely said upon our first meeting. She was a music college student, 5 years younger than Greg. Though my dress was non-branded, it was decent and appropriate for a greeting. I felt embarrassed wondering if it was really that funny. According to Greg, being too fond of him as a brother, she had harassed every girlfriend he had brought home. Moreover, she had grown up spoiled, unable to do any household chores. However, the saving grace was that the only one being unreasonable was Erica. My father-in-law scolded her. "Erica, how can you speak so rudely to a guest we're meeting for the first time? Stop it." My mother-in-law also admonished her, and the situation was diffused. After the introductions were done, our marriage was officially decided, and we were allowed to build a house on the grounds of Greg's parents' estate. I moved in immediately and was unpacking when Erica suddenly entered. "Hey, are you seriously planning to marry my brother?" Her sudden familiarity was off-putting. I dislike such people. So, I deliberately spoke to her in a distant, polite manner. "Yes, I am." "You've got some nerve. Do you know what out of your league means? Even if my parents accept you, I don't." "That's okay. I don't need your permission. However, I do intend to marry Greg, and I would like to get along with you, if possible." Erica seemed taken aback when I talked back to her. She turned red and said, "What? This woman is so annoying. Greg, what do you see in her?" She doesn't suit you at all. In response, Greg defended me. Well, everything about her is perfect. If I had to say, it's her thoughtful and intelligent nature. Also, her independence. If you're not going to help, just leave. Huh, okay. But you know, if you're going to be a part of this family, you should at least be able to play an instrument or two. You can play the piano, right? Oh, sorry, poor people probably never learned. Erica, currently a senior in college, had even won a piano competition. Facing a smirking Erica, Greg said, "All right, let's go to the main house now." Then he whispered to me quietly, "Sarah, play that for her." Upon entering the main family house, the in-laws were surprised. And Erica seated me in front of the piano. Sarah is going to perform now. I wonder what she'll play. Since she's a preschool teacher, maybe just Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Despite the ridiculing sister-in-law and the astonished in-laws, I began to play a challenging piece by Liszt. After I finished playing, the room fell silent for a moment but was soon filled with vigorous applause. Incredible. That was a professional-level performance. What a clear, sparkling sound. Father-in-law also added, "That's true. It's a shame to only have you as a preschool teacher. Where did you learn to play like this?" Greg then explained. I had loved music from a young age, always playing with toy pianos. I would listen intently to the piano sounds from a neighbor's house. Although I wanted to learn, my family couldn't afford lessons then. One day, a woman from the neighborhood, who had graduated from a music college, noticed me listening outside her house and spoke to me. She started teaching me piano whenever I visited her home. This child should learn from a proper teacher. She has talent. She even came to my parents to tell them this. She then introduced me to a professor from a prestigious music university, a judge at piano competitions, who was quite renowned. This professor, Ms. Hansen, accepted me as a scholarship student when she saw me play. I would travel to her house by bus for lessons, which were strict and demanding. But she taught me thoroughly. Thanks to her, I advanced and even won awards at competitions. Though there was talk of attending a music university, it seemed impractical. There was the option of scholarships, but music school costs were more than just tuition. Since I loved children and just wanted a place to play the piano, I moved to the city, graduated from junior college, and became a preschool teacher. After Greg finished explaining, mother-in-law said, "Even without a music degree, if you have that level of skill, you can perform anywhere. Your piano playing has such clear and aligned notes. I think you can heal many people with your music." Father-in-law nodded in agreement. Well, for an amateur, I guess it was okay. Erica had hoped to embarrass me, but failed and looked frustrated. Seeing her sulky face was satisfying, though this incident made her dislike me even more. I work full-time at a preschool, so I try to help with household chores at my in-laws on my days off. Whenever my mother-in-law was away for errands or performances, Erica would invariably make snide remarks or harass me. "Hey, I'm hungry, make some snacks." When she had no classes, she would laze around and give me tasks. Diane, a housemaid helping out, would say, "Miss, I can prepare the snacks." But Erica would sneer, "It's okay, this person is our family's maid. Diane, don't interfere." Then, after I made the snacks, Erica would throw them at me, saying, "What's this? Gross. You're terrible at this." Once, she even kicked a bucket of water I had prepared for mopping, causing me to slip and fall. Oops, sorry. That wasn't on purpose. But good, right? What's that saying about dripping water? As Erica left laughing loudly, Diane looked worriedly at me and said, "Are you okay?" She is too much. She comforted me while helping me clean up. I'm okay. I could only manage a wry smile and somehow get through the situation. One day, I was practicing on the piano that my father-in-law had prepared at our home. My job at a Christian preschool involves playing music during morning services, church masses, and events. That's why I never missed a day of practice. Such a poor performance. Despite it being our home, Erica would come in uninvited just to make snide remarks. She should practice herself if she has time to criticize others. Lately, she hasn't seemed to practice at all. Ignoring her, I suddenly realized she was messing with the props and costumes prepared for a Christmas play. Don't touch those. I couldn't help but raise my voice. Not liking that I shouted at her, Erica reacted by breaking one of the props. Enough already. I couldn't stay silent any longer and confronted her, which made her snap back. Don't get cocky. For a poor person. This tacky thing is better off broken, it's for the kid's sake. With those parting words, she stormed out, slamming the door. Stunned by the incident, I stood there dazed but soon hurried to fix what was broken. That evening, I couldn't keep silent about it and told Greg. He was furious and scolded Erica, and hearing about it, my father-in-law also gave her a stern talking to. I'm sorry, Sarah. She's really out of line. He apologized with a sigh. No, it's okay. It's also my fault for bringing important things to the house. No, it's not normal to break them. Has she been harassing you in other ways? Tell me if anything happens. Just having his support was enough for me. Then, a change finally came. Erica, who used to come to bother me whenever she had free time, graduated from university and got a job at her father's company. Relieved that I wouldn't be disturbed during the day anymore, I felt a deep sense of relief. About 6 months after Erica started her job, her father arranged a match for her. Initially, she wasn't keen, but upon meeting the gentleman, Ben, she seemed to quite like him as he was refreshing and kind. And their marriage was quickly decided. Engaged, she would be busy with him and wedding preparations, and wouldn't have time to bother me anymore. I looked forward to this and felt relieved. One day, during a relaxed moment after a meal at my in-laws' house, the in-laws made a suggestion. It's been a while since we've gone to a classical concert as a family, hasn't it? Let's go to one. It's been busy, but it's nice having Sarah join the family. Everyone was pleased by his suggestion, and I was of course delighted. Thank you so much. I'm really happy. Just then, Erica remarked. Well, Sarah must be happy, since poor people don't usually get to go to classical concerts. However, unbeknownst to her, this wasn't my first time at a live performance. Listening to live music is a learning experience. I had been to a concert before with Ms. Hanson, but I didn't mention it because Erica was being troublesome. The interpretation of music changes with different conductors and musicians, making it a valuable learning experience. My father-in-law showed us various concert options and asked which one I liked. I shyly pointed to one. This one would be nice. Then, Erica asked, Hey, Dad, can I take Ben to the concert too? Of course. Then, I'll arrange the tickets, my father-in-law replied. My mother-in-law mentioned that she might be able to arrange tickets through her connections. No need, I'll handle the ticket arrangements. He's well connected, and I can get it done faster. Erica interjected, so she took over the ticket arrangements. Unfortunately, on the day of the concert, my father-in-law had sudden work commitments and couldn't make it. So, the 5 of us, mother-in-law, Greg, Erica, Ben, and I went to the concert venue together. Erica received tickets from someone she seemed to know and returned to us. Then she began handing them out to everyone, but she walked right past me and said, "Okay, that's everyone's. Let's go." What about mine? I was the only one without a ticket. There's no ticket for you. I'd be embarrassed to be seen with someone from the bottom. Go home before anyone sees you. Furthermore, she said, it's 100 years too early for commoners like you to sit with us at a classical concert. You're an eyesore, so could you just disappear? There was no reason for her to say that to me. I wasn't invited by her. I came only because of my in-laws' kindness. This is ridiculous. What do you want from me? Do you dislike me that much? Fine, I'll go home. I don't want to be in the same space as a woman like you either. As I was about to leave, seeing Erica smirking, Greg shouted at her. Wait. There's no need for Sarah to go home. Erica, enough is enough. If you don't like it, you leave. It was the first time my usually gentle husband got so angry. Did you think I didn't know anything? You've been doing nothing but petty harassment to Sarah, haven't you? What? It's your fault. It's because you married a poor person like her. Who do you think you are? We are not royalty or nobility. We're just ordinary people too. Speak only after you become independent like Sarah. You should be shameful, just lying around the house and doing nothing. Greg was so stern that even Erica was taken aback. Then she turned to look at my mother-in-law for support. Mom, I'm not wrong, am I? This woman doesn't belong in this house, right? Then my mother-in-law quietly began to speak. Yes, you are wrong. Greg is right. Did you think I didn't know anything? You have always been mean to Sarah. Your heart is poorer than any a poor person. And, despite talking big about music, you haven't touched the piano lately, have you? Your skills are getting rusty. You were indeed great in the past. But you've been clinging to that past glory, becoming arrogant, and neglecting your practice. I can't help it. I'm busy with my new job now. Busy? You had plenty of time to harass and be snide to Sarah before you got the job, right? You hadn't been practicing since back then. Caught out by my mother-in-law, Erica turned red. Indeed, she had stopped seriously engaging with the piano without anyone realizing it. Like any instrument, if you don't practice daily, your skills will get rusty. Diane told me about what you've said and done. It's really pitiful. Since you insisted on handling the tickets, the responsibility for not getting one lies with you. If you don't like it, you should leave. What, even you, Mom? Fine, I feel sick. I'm leaving. Ben, let's go. As Erica tried to pull him away, he firmly shook off her hand. You go if you want. I'm disappointed. What was that all about? From what I heard, you've been verbally abusing your sister-in-law regularly. I really dislike people who are cruel like that. What? Now utterly discredited, Erica lost all her standing. Ben turned to my mother-in-law and declared, I apologize, but I cannot lead a married life with someone like Erica. I will also apologize to her father, but I must call off the engagement. Yes, that's understandable. I apologize for showing you such an embarrassing scene. As my mother-in-law apologized, Erica said, Huh? What's that? If you break off the engagement, I'll demand compensation. Are you all crazy? With that, she threw down her ticket and stormed out. My husband picked up the ticket and said, Now, this is for you, Sarah. Let's go together, Ben. He urged us, and we entered the venue. The majestic sound of the orchestra for the second time in my life deeply moved me. It was fascinating that the same music could sound so different depending on the performers and the conductors. The unique ambience of the concert hall allowed us to fully experience the conductor's presence, his mastery with the baton, the musicians' movements, and the powerful resonance of their instruments. Upon our return to my in-laws' home, we found Erica there. And her father had just come back as well. Suddenly, he slapped Erica across the face. Shocked, Erica heard her father angrily declare, "What a disgrace you are." Today's incident aside, it seems you've also caused unbelievable trouble at the company. There was, of course, a reason for his anger. Despite being employed at her father's company, Erica behaved arrogantly during training sessions, showing no serious engagement and often threatening senior employees by saying, "How dare you speak to the president's daughter like that? I'll tell my father." Besides, she frequently skipped work and went off somewhere. Her attitude had severely damaged her reputation at the company, leading to a direct confrontation from frustrated colleagues. Moreover, despite being engaged, she had an affair with a married male colleague, and often sneaked out during work hours with him. The man's wife contacted my father-in-law, the president. "You're fired, as well as that male employee. I cannot oversee your life any longer. It's time you lived on your own and faced the harsh realities of the world." Following this, Erica was expelled from the family home. She boasted defiantly as she left that she would enter competitions and earn more through her music career than any of us. However, it turned out she was unable to win even a single prize at any competition she entered. That was natural. Her performances, fueled solely by a desire for revenge, lacked soul and failed to move anyone. Eventually, unable to win awards or even secure performance opportunities, Erica found herself living in a shabby apartment, struggling with basic housekeeping and leading a miserable life. A friend of mine mentioned seeing her working a cash register at a supermarket, where she was often scolded by a fearsome older part-time worker. She was now living the ordinary life she had once scorned, facing hardships she had never imagined. In the meantime, encouraged by my mother-in-law and coached by Ms. Hansen, I continued to refine my piano skills and achieved second place in a prestigious competition dominated by music college graduates. Though my main job remains being a preschool teacher, I also perform occasionally at nursing homes and wedding venues, playing for the children and seeing their sparkling smiles, as well as experiencing the thrill of performing in large venues, have become invaluable parts of my daily life. Sometimes, Greg plays the violin while I play the piano, and we enjoy duets together. I also perform duets with my mother-in-law, which are incredibly enjoyable. Surrounded by my beloved family and music, I look forward to continuing this happy life.